I have a question to you
Yes.
because we came across a couple of discussions here in our house about distinction between emotions, thoughts, feelings, intuition, these things, how they differ, how to, react, how to control or let them control us, or
Right.
how does this like all come together? Because we often talk at satsang about like how our mind works, like we are not our thoughts, like and so on. Because I guess there is a distinction between each, but sometimes you don't even know how it's formed, like how it comes,
Yes.
like if thought creates emotion or if it's
Yeah.
the other way, like and like all these interactions, like just like as you always say, like it's one big study. So that it would be really interesting to maybe have your insight or like something what.
Yeah. So everything that is in the field of what we know is on a range from gross or very solid or very obvious, like a wooden hut. Johanna is staying in a wooden hut. Like it's known to be wood. You know what is wood, you see wood. We know what it feels like when you touch it. We know the color of it. We know the purpose of it. It's obvious. It's also very tangible. So it's on the level of being gross manifestation. Manifest because it's in the field of the known. All that which is manifest is known, can be known. I'm not saying it is necessarily known consciously, but it's in the field of the known. And then on that same sliding scale, it goes through all that which is known now can go more and more and more subtle levels to like a thought, a feeling, a memory, an imagination. What is it that we can create an image? I can create an image of a dragon. I can see a dragon, but unlike the wood, I can't touch it. So it's more subtle. It's still a form, still something that has been manifest, still something that can be known. I know the imagination of a dragon. And at the most subtle level goes towards perception. How do we perceive something? Intuition, a more subtle form of thought, less influenced by the weight of the grosser manifestation. All that which is on that manifest level is also within the spectrum on the obvious level, more obvious level, is also influenced by the elements. Manifestation that is very solid, as I said, wood or even metal. Water is less gross, but it's heavy and it's powerful. Fire is not as heavy as water, more powerful. Air, you can't see air. You only see things move. So we conclude that there is air because we see other forms being moved by this invisible force, more subtle, more powerful. If you take air away from fire, fire can't exist. So all elements are dependent upon their more subtle form. More subtle than air, thinking, feeling, perceiving, intuiting. Consciousness, more subtle still. What is consciousness? Now we've gone out of the realm of matter. And yet it's still described in the field of manifestation. And that is why in the Advait non-dual tradition, The system uses this word in Sanskrit, should. It's not English should, as in shoulds and shouldn'ts. Should, S-H-U-D-H, should. And it means pure. It means it's not influenced by anything in the field of manifestation. Pure. It hasn't become something and cannot be influenced by anything. So thoughts, feelings, even within that realm of the more subtle, are also within their own field of the known. You could say grosser thoughts. For example, I don't mean gross as in, ooh, yuck. Gross doesn't mean that. Gross means more relating to the obvious, to the more formed. Even within thinking and feeling, and you're right, they are intertwined. You can't say there's a clear distinction between the two. They're essentially waves of consciousness. And even those frequencies or waves range from gross to subtle. So, for example, fear, jealousy, anger, they are more gross waves or frequency than what we tap into in satsang, subtler perception. Perception of the knower as opposed to the field of the known. So more and more and more subtle. And yet there's no distinction between any of it ultimately. It's all in this wavering, changing field of the known. What is most subtle, being able to turn the attention of the mind out of its raw state or out of its more instinctive state, such as anger, fear, division, possessiveness, hatred. That is a gross state, and you have that sense that you shouldn't dwell or stay in those energies. You have the sense to lift yourself or direct your attention so-called higher, which means more subtle. That's why you've come to satsang, and that's why you're interested in meditation. So there's some force that's always progressing towards the more subtle. The more you encourage that force or you don't inhibit that force, the more subtle state you will live, and thereby the result will be less conflict and less heaviness and less adversity in your life, because you'll be living a more subtle state of existence. You won't be driven so much by your instinct and the thoughts that fire up the instinct, as opposed to putting the energy towards, as you said, the higher study. What is the purpose of my life? Am I here just to be angry, fearful, possessive, defensive, negatively oriented? Or am I here to lift my attention? What power is that? That still, even that is in the field of the known, but it has the power to be directed out of the gross into the subtle. You use the word control when it comes to thinking and feeling and perceiving. You said, how do they all interact with each other? And what is the sense that I don't know, I can't remember exactly now what you said, but should control or can control, have the ability to control. We have the ability to direct our attention from gross to subtle, from conflict to oneness, from misery into light. We have that power. It's not thought of very often, and we could call it control, but it's not the control that is a kind of forced overpowering of something. That's not the kind of control it is. Like if you're trying to force yourself not to indulge in something. But it's this directing of the attention. Vivek Vairagya. These are two words you're very familiar with. How do I, with discernment, know this whole field? As you said, bring it into the study. Know this whole field so thoroughly, having studied, having observed, having discussed with your satsang friends, having inquired within and observed something within. Question is always, what state do I want to live? Do I want to live small, miserable, defensive, needy, insecure? Or do I want to control, which in this case would be, do I want to uplift my state of consciousness into the more subtle, my higher self? Something is drawing us there, like the moth that gets drawn to a flame. Why is it that the moths go towards the flames? You want to say, hey guys, just enjoy the evening. What are you dive bombing yourself into the flame for? But somehow we have the sense to fly towards the light. So that's what's to be studied. And in that study, who is the one, or what is that power that leads me to inquire, leads me to being more observing than being more involved in my emotions, especially in the emotions that take me towards conflict, anger, hatred, etc. What is that that wants to be directed outwardly? And you are right. In the field of all of this that we have observed, there's no distinction really between all of it. It's like a big ocean, the ocean of human consciousness, the ocean of human existence. It's huge. And as meditators, we are widening, expanding our knowledge of this state of being human, not excluding more subtle levels of consciousness, ultimately pure consciousness, as I said before, should. And why it is brought in, this word should, Sat, Chit, Aanand. Sat means pure existence. Chit means pure consciousness. Aanand means pure love. The pure distinguishes it from the gross. Pure means not influenced by or made into anything on the field of manifestation. It is the quality of the knower as opposed to the known. Knower, observer, cannot be influenced by, not be made bound by, not be made small by anything that is known. Anything on the level of manifestation, from our base instinct to survive to our higher ability to expand our consciousness. I am the knower, pure, free, ever present. And the study of that, and ultimately the realization of that, slowly, slowly opening more and more, that it becomes more than just a study. But the study is leading us somewhere, leading us out of a smaller, more confined, thereby more instinctive, more defensive state of existence to a more open and more beauty. The more open one is, the more beauty is in one's life. The more precious our interactions are with people. Less just playing out one's own inner world in terms of their mind. People often aren't even talking to each other. They're just verbalizing their own thoughts. And if the thoughts are frustrated, because their inner state is frustrated, they're going to be just speaking that, projecting it on the person in front of them. And then that person who's living in their reality, mind reality, mental reality, ego reality, which means small, confined reality, and the frustrations thereby, they're going to be projecting their frustrations on the other person. So my guru used to describe it on that level. If people are not really communicating, they're just projecting, playing out their inner state, their inner mental state. He would say it's like two people sleep talking, thinking that they're having a conversation. That's what human beings are kind of doing. They are just sleep talking, which means they're not really open to a more subtle energy of really connecting, really communicating, really seeing, free from the influence of the smaller mind that lives very defensively. So that's why I called it beauty or bliss. Bliss is not an experience, remember, because should Aanand, pure bliss. Pure means it's not conditional to this field of the known. It can be better described thereby as rather than an experience of bliss, then it is that openness to really seeing life as it is when it is free from the limitations of our little bubble-like ego identity. It is beautiful. Total beauty, total bliss, total peace. Just madhuram. Was that helpful, Martin?
Yeah, it's beautiful how you describe it.
Great. Helpful?
Like,
You
like
can,
mind, like to make distinctions. This is emotions. This is a thought. This is maybe higher because it's an intuition, like, and
yeah.
then a discussion like what should we pay more attention to and what should we maybe try to discard. And the mind always starts to name things and,
Yes.
like put them into buckets. So I really like the way how you say like that those are waves and some are maybe wider and some are maybe more,
Yeah.
higher frequencies and so on, but they're all in the realm of like good and bad and see
Yes.
it from the blue, right? That's the answer, underlying answer.
We think that by dividing and categorizing and naming something, which to an extent is true, it is helpful. That's what the whole satsang is. We are identifying the whole human experience, how we act, how we feel, how we think, how we interact. So the whole human experience, we are putting it under a microscope and looking at this part, and another satsang, we look at this part, and then we look at this part. It's very complex, extremely, extremely complex. So it's true, we dissect, we categorize, we separate them out. This is that, and this is this, but only for the sake of study. In reality, nothing is separated in that way. It's only helpful because we've made everything so limited by our ego perception that we don't see the whole picture. So in that limited consciousness, we are really in the dark. And in the dark, one does not live a very great existence. Hence, from that darkness comes the anger, comes the attachment, comes the greed, because it's an insecure place. If you don't know the whole, if you're flying a plane and you don't know how all those instruments work, all those buttons and knobs, and it's all computerized now, I'm sure. I've never been in a cockpit of a plane, but in the movies, it looks like that. All those dials and flashing lights here. If I don't know it all, how can I fly that plane? It will crash. I have to learn that. So similarly with this human existence, if we don't know it, we kind of crash into things. I was having a discussion with Alison. We create consequences because of our actions, because they were born of not really seeing the whole picture. So in satsang, we slowly open to a wider angle, a wider lens of knowing ourselves and thereby knowing each other, knowing humanity. You just have to look at yourself. It's all there. All of humanity is within your own study of your own self. So we study it, yes, but in reality, it is one ocean. Like you cannot really divide one wave from another wave. So an emotion ultimately is a thought, and a thought is an emotion. They're one and the same thing, but they have a different effect on us. Now, even within the field of an emotion, how much is it governed by more towards thinking processes? How much do we unleash that emotion? How much do we restrain that emotion? When is it appropriate to express it? When is it appropriate to not express it? So you can't really say that separate things. They're all waves of the same frequency of being a human being. And yet you are right. We have to study it because otherwise we don't know how to live free from chaos that comes from the small, limited ego identification, which means a very limited understanding of who we are. So, yeah, the more understanding you have, the more knowledge you have of human behavior in the light of satsang, widening our lens, as I said. But more than that, it's leading the attention to the more subtle. Many psychiatrists, psychologists, human behavioralists, sociologists, many people are in the field of understanding human beings, neuroscience, medical doctors, psychiatrists, so many. But what makes satsang a unique inquiry is we are leading the attention to the more subtle, adding the question, what is the purpose of being a human being? Is it just to remain stuck in my ego identification? I am only this little bubble of experience, separate from other bubbles of experience. And in satsang, we start to study it as a whole ocean, and including the most subtle in terms of what is that is pure? What is that which remains untouched? What is that remains uninfluenced by all of this that we study? What is that force that sees through these eyes? What is that force that thinks through this very subtle instrument of perception? What is the light that sparks perception? Not what am I perceiving, but what is the very spark that even sparks perception? It's the study of pure consciousness, pure existence, pure bliss. And that's where we need to meditate. Because it's not enough just the study. Study is important, definitely beneficial for leading the attention to the more subtle, and then you have to close your eyes. Let's close our eyes. Absorb this subtle state. Satsang has led the attention of the mind out of its small, limited existence, concerns about the small things, your personal concerns, your personal circumstances, your personal ambitions, your personal desires. We haven't talked about anything personal. And yet I've been talking for 35 minutes and nothing personal. I didn't tell you one thing about my day. And yet we spoke at such a deep level. Or your question invited this deep level for all of us to examine through your question. And ultimately, who is this conscious being? Gives light to everything that is known. That cannot be studied as an object, and you being the subject. There cannot be a you separate from what is known. just as your eyes cannot see themselves. And that's where meditation becomes such a brilliant force, a brilliant power that tunes you in. Once the mind has been led to its most subtle perception, just sit and sit in that answered state, in the state of knowledge. I am. Who is that one who knows? Who is that one who can feel, who can think? What power generates that thinking, that feeling? It is you. But we are so habituated to say, you is this person. It is the you should pure. Pure being I am. Pure being I am. Before thinking, I am. Before feeling, I am. Obviously, because you observe your feeling. You can describe your feeling. So you are there. With what words we cannot say, but we can say it is pure. It is free. And it is unchanging, ever present. You. The presence. Describe simply, I am. Before I think, I am. Before I feel, I am. While I think, while I feel, I am. And when that feeling and that thinking, these waves in the ocean of the human experience subside, I am. This is what is meditated upon. I am. I am pure, constant, unwavering, and everything that is experienced, known, perceived, thought, felt is of the changing. A wave-like manifestation, intricately interwoven as the whole human experience. And I am remains always pristine. I am pure being. I am pure consciousness. I am pure bliss. This is to be meditated upon. Cannot be grasped with the intellect, for it is the very light that generates any power in the intellect. And therefore meditation is most essential. I am. And with great patience and with regularity, we just take a little time to sit. I am. And the beauty of this stillness and this silence, I am. So profound, so beautiful. Everything pales in comparison. So we don't take ourselves, therefore, so seriously in our personal bubble personality. We are released from the burden and the seriousness of our individual little ego bubble when we realize how vast is the pure I am. But it has to be practiced, or it has to be given time. We have devoted so much time to our personalities. We are intoxicated with our individual egos. We have to give some time, some patience, some value to your true self. I am. I am pure being, pure consciousness, pure bliss, Amaramham, Madhuramham, eternal, unchanging, ever present, and free.